John Carter rubbed his tired eyes and reached for his coffee mug. The night shift at Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Station was usually quiet, but he didn't mind. After 5 years working communications, he preferred the peace of the overnight hours. The endless chatter of incoming signals from humanity's expanding presence among the stars had become like music to him. A soft beep from his console broke the silence. John frowned. It was an emergency frequency from New Dawn, humanity's pride and joy. The first true interstellar colony on Proxima Centauri, be home to 50,000 brave souls who had journeyed 4 light-years to build humanity's future among the stars. This is Earth Deep Space Monitoring. Go ahead, New Dawn, John said, sitting up straighter. Static crackled, then screams. John's fingers flew across his console, boosting the signal strength. New Dawn, please repeat. Your transmission is breaking up. The static cleared. What replaced it made John's blood freeze in his veins. On his screen appeared a live feed from New Dawn's Central Plaza. People ran in terror as sleek, silver ships descended from the sky. Beams of intense blue light cut through buildings like they were made of paper. The colony's protective dome cracked open like an egg. "Oh my God," John whispered. He slammed the emergency alert button. "Control room. I need everyone here now." Within minutes, the control room filled with bleary-eyed technicians and officers. No one spoke as they watched the destruction unfold. The aliens moved with terrible purpose. They weren't just attacking. They were exterminating. Their ships methodically swept through residential areas, research facilities, and farmlands. Nothing was spared. The signal. It's being broadcast on all frequencies, a technician said, her voice shaking. They're making sure we see this. John nodded numbly. Can we establish communication with them? We're trying. No response. On screen, the colony's defense forces mounted a desperate resistance. Their weapons seemed to bounce off the alien ships like raindrops. A brave pilot rammed his shuttle directly into one of the ships. The resulting explosion barely scratched the alien vessel. The station director, Susan Miller, arrived, her face pale. "Get me the Joint Chiefs. Now." As the hours passed, Earth watched in horror as the colony was systematically destroyed. News agencies picked up the signal. Soon, the entire planet witnessed the slaughter in real time. The aliens took their time. They weren't rushed. They wanted Earth to see every moment. Families huddled together in their final moments. Children cried for parents who couldn't protect them. Researchers burned alongside their discoveries. By dawn, it was over. 50,000 lives. Gone. The final transmission showed an alien figure, tall and insect-like, with multiple limbs, and a carapace that shimmered with iridescent colors. It stepped over human bodies without concern, approaching the camera. Its face had no features that John could recognize as a mouth, but somehow words emerged. "Witness the price of expansion," the creature said in broken English. "Your kind was warned. Your kind ignored. Now your kind is seen. Retreat or face extinction." The screen went black. Silence filled the control room. Someone sobbed quietly. John sat frozen, coffee forgotten, and cold beside him. Susan's voice finally broke the silence. "Send word to the president. Tell him," her voice cracked. "Tell him that we are at war." Outside the station windows, the first light of dawn touched the mountains. John thought of New Dawn, the colony named for humanity's bright future among the stars. Now there was no dawn there, only night. But on Earth, as news spread and the horrific footage played on screens worldwide, something else dawned. Rage. A cold, terrible fury that united humanity like never before. The aliens had wanted Earth to witness the massacre. They hadn't realized what they were awakening. The lights in the White House Situation Room were harsh. Admiral Samantha Wells stood with perfect military posture despite having been awake for 36 hours straight. Around the table sat the hastily assembled emergency response team. "The death toll is confirmed at 50,000, she said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her rage. Every man, woman, and child in the New Dawn colony. President William Boyd nodded grimly. The footage had aged him overnight. Deep lines etched his face as he stared at the screens showing riots across major cities worldwide. "The public is demanding action," said Greg Mason, the military strategist known for his calm under pressure. Today, even his hands shook slightly. "We've never seen protests on this scale before. Every nation, every city. They want blood." Dr. Lisa Ford, the best xenobiologist Earth had, replayed footage of the aliens. "We're calling them the Xendari, based on the symbols on their ships. They're unlike anything we've encountered in our explorations so far." "Were there any warning signs?" the president asked. "Any attempt at communication before this attack?" Alan Scott, the diplomatic officer with 20 years of first contact protocol experience, looked up from his tablet. "We're finding evidence that there might have been. Our automated systems classified several unusual signals from that sector as background radiation. We're reanalyzing them now." Outside the White House, the crowd's chants grew louder. "Remember New Dawn. Vengeance now." Admiral Wells turned to the window. "This wasn't random, Mr. President. The broadcast was deliberate. They'd wanted Earth to see. They wanted us afraid." "But why?" Dr. Ford asked, rewinding to the alien's final message. "Witness the price of expansion. Your kind was warned." She paused the footage. "They believed they sent warnings. They expected us to understand and retreat." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. A communication failure had cost 50,000 lives. "That doesn't justify genocide," Greg said, slamming his fist on the table. "Nothing does." President Boyd stood up. In 30 minutes, he would address the world. "What are our options?" Admiral Wells brought up a holographic display of Earth's defensive capabilities. "We have 27 space vessels with minimal weapon systems. They were designed for exploration, not war. We can retrofit them, but against what we saw." She didn't need to finish. "The Xendari ships have weaknesses," Dr. Ford said. Everyone turned to her. "Their hulls show signs of biological components. That might give us something to work with." Elan raised his hand. "Mr. President, first contact protocol still applies. We should attempt communication before." "They killed 50,000 people while broadcasting it to our living rooms," Gray interrupted. "I think we're past protocols." The president sighed. "Alan, you have 72 hours to establish communication. After that, we prepare for war." He looked at Admiral Wells. "I want every ship we have ready. Contact every nation." This isn't an American response. This is humanity's response. As they left the Situation Room, news came in from around the world. Countries that had been enemies for generations were offering resources, ships, and soldiers. Weapons research labs were sharing data openly. Private space companies were converting their vessels for military use. In orbit, space stations redirected their telescopes, searching for signs of the Xendari fleet. Scientists worked around the clock analyzing the attack footage for any clue that might help. Later that evening, President Boyd addressed a united Earth from the Oval Office. His speech was brief but resolute. "Today, we all witnessed an atrocity. 50,000 lives snuffed out while we watched, helpless. The attackers wanted to frighten us, to make us retreat from the stars." He paused, his expression hardening. "Instead, they have united us. As of this moment, Earth is at war, and we will have justice for New Dawn." Across the planet, billions watched in solemn agreement. Humanity had never been more united, or more dangerous. Alan Scott hadn't slept in 2 days. His office walls were covered with alien symbols and language patterns extracted from the broadcast. With only 24 hours left before his diplomatic window closed, desperation drove him. "They must have tried to communicate," he muttered, studying the signals previously dismissed as background radiation. The computer worked to decode what might be language within the seemingly random bursts. Down the hall, Dr. Lisa Ford hunched over microscopic fragments collected from previous deep space missions. The particles matched the whole material visible in the broadcast footage. "Definitely biological components," she said to her team. "Some kind of living metal that responds to stimuli." She tested various frequencies against the samples. When exposed to a specific radiation pattern, the material shuddered and began to break down. "I think we found something," she said, reaching for the secure phone. Meanwhile, in the newly established war room, Greg Mason briefed military leaders from 28 nations. Holographic displays showed Earth's defensive positions and the last known location of the Xendari fleet near the edge of the solar system. "They haven't moved closer yet," Greg said, "but our deep space monitors indicate they're building something, possibly a larger weapon or a jump gate for reinforcements." The door opened and Admiral Wells entered with the president. "Ladies and gentlemen," President Boyd said, "you represent the combined military might of Earth. For the first time in human history, there are no nations in this fight, only humanity against extinction." Screens around the room showed the global mobilization effort. Shipyards that once built luxury space cruisers now produced weapon systems. Universities converted laboratories to military research. Millions of volunteers lined up at recruitment centers worldwide. Greg pointed to the orbital defense grid. "We've upgraded our satellite network with weapons, but they won't stop a determined attack. Our best chance is to strike first, before they enter Earth's orbit." Admiral Wells nodded. "We've been retrofitting every ship we have with weapons. The fleet will be ready in 5 days." "We might not have 5 days," said a voice from the doorway. Alan walked in, his face grim. "I've decoded their warning messages. They've given us a deadline to completely withdraw from all space exploration. It expires tomorrow." The room fell silent. "What do your diplomatic instincts tell you?" the president asked. Alan sighed. "That they have no interest in peace. The messages were not invitations to communicate. They were orders to retreat or die." Greg studied the tactical display. "Then we fight." "Wait," Dr. Ford hurried in, holding a datapad. "I found something." She brought up molecular scans on the main screen. "The Xendari ships aren't just piloted by them. They're partly grown from them. The hulls contain biological matter linked to their nervous systems." "How does this help us?" Admiral Wells asked. "They're vulnerable to specific radiation frequencies. A targeted pulse could disrupt their ship's functions, maybe even their weapon systems." Greg's expression brightened slightly. "Can we weaponize this?" "Theoretically, yes. But we'd need to get close enough to deliver the pulse." The president studied the scans. "How long to develop a functional weapon?" 3 days, minimum," Dr. Ford replied. "And it would need to be delivered directly to their fleet." A warning alarm blared. All eyes turned to the main view screen. A second transmission from the Xendari had begun broadcasting worldwide. This time, it showed the destruction of an unmanned research outpost near Jupiter's moons. The same methodical elimination of human presence. The same message: retreat or face extinction. When the screen went dark, President Boyd looked at each person in the room. His decision was made. "Admiral Wells, Operation Retribution is authorized. Greg, incorporate Dr. Ford's radiation weapon into the battle plan. We strike as soon as the weapon is ready." Alan closed his eyes briefly. Diplomacy had failed. Now only vengeance remained. Outside, the first warships of the human fleet rose from Earth's shipyards, their hulls gleaming in the sunlight. The U.S. Vengeance gleamed under the shipyard lights. Once a luxury passenger vessel called the Stellar Princess, it was now Earth's flagship, its sleek hull bristling with hastily mounted weapons. Captain Frank Murphy stood on the bridge, watching his crew prepare for departure. "Weapons check complete, Captain," said Pete Johnson, a former video game designer who now served as weapons specialist. His fingers danced across screens showing the newly installed radiation emitters. "Engineering reports all systems ready," Maria Rodriguez added from the tactical station. Before the attack, she had been a commercial pilot. Now she wore a military uniform with Earth's new United Forces emblem. Frank looked around the bridge. His crew had trained together for just 5 days. 5 days to prepare for humanity's first space battle. The responsibility weighed on him, but he kept his face calm. "Dr. Ford, status on the radiation weapons?" he asked. Lisa Ford looked up from her station. Dark circles ringed her eyes. "The emitters are stable. They'll generate the frequency that disrupted the biological components in testing. But we'll need to get within 5 kilometers of their ships for maximum effect." 5 kilometers is suicide range, Maria muttered. Frank nodded. "That's why we have 200 ships, not just one. We'll create openings for strike teams to get close enough." On the main screen, Earth grew smaller as the fleet moved toward the edge of the solar system. Thousands of family members had gathered to watch the launch. Many crews had recorded messages for loved ones, not knowing if they'd return. In Washington, President Boyd and his advisors monitored the fleet's progress. Public support for the mission was overwhelming. The images of New Dawn's destruction had been seared into humanity's collective memory. "The Xendari fleet hasn't moved," Greg reported, studying sensor data. "They're still in formation beyond Neptune's orbit." Admiral Wells frowned. "They must know we're coming. Why aren't they retreating or advancing?" "Maybe they don't consider us a threat," Allen suggested. "They've seen our technology. They know how outmatched we are. They're about to learn differently," President Boyd said quietly. Back on the Vengeance, Frank called his officers for a final briefing. The plan was daring. While the main fleet engaged the Xendari ships from a distance, small, fast shuttles would dart in close to deliver the radiation pulses. "I need volunteers to pilot the strike shuttles," Frank said. "This is beyond the call of duty. I won't order anyone to take on this risk." Maria was the first to step forward. "I'll lead the strike team, sir." Pete nodded. "I'll go too. I know the weapons systems better than anyone." One by one, others joined until they had enough pilots for all 20 strike shuttles. "Thank you," Frank said, his voice thick with emotion. "Humanity won't forget your courage." The briefing ended, and Frank returned to his quarters for a moment of quiet before battle. On his desk sat a photo of his family back on Earth. He touched the image gently. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. "Captain to the bridge," came Maria's voice. "We've detected movement in the Xendari fleet." Frank rushed to the bridge. On the main screen, the alien ships were shifting formation. "They're moving into attack positions," Maria reported. "They've detected us." Frank straightened his uniform. This was it. Humanity's first interstellar battle. 50,000 deaths to avenge. "All hands to battle stations," he ordered, his voice steady. "Inform the fleet. Operation Retribution begins now." Throughout the ship, warning lights flashed red. Crew members raced to their positions. In the shuttle bay, Maria and her strike team prepared their vessels. As the distance closed between the human fleet and the alien armada, Frank sent one final message to Earth, for New Dawn. Then he gave the order that would change humanity's future forever. All ships engaged the enemy. Space lit up with explosions as the human fleet engaged the Xendari. The alien ships moved with unnatural grace, their silver hulls reflecting the light of distant stars. They fired blue energy beams that sliced through 3 human vessels in the first minute of battle. "Evasive maneuvers," Frank ordered as the Vengeance shuddered under enemy fire. "All ships, maintain formation but keep moving. Don't give them a stationary target." On Earth, billions watched the battle through the fleet's cameras. In the White House Situation Room, Admiral Wells gripped the edge of the table. "We're losing ships too quickly," she said, watching as another human vessel exploded. Greg pointed to the tactical display. "Look, the Xendari ships move in perfect harmony, almost like they're connected," Dr. Ford finished. "The biological components might form a network. They're functioning as one organism." Back in space, Maria led her strike team toward the battle. The 20 small shuttles were nearly invisible against the backdrop of the larger fight. "Strike team, stay in shadow formation," she ordered. "Use the debris and larger ships for cover." Pete's voice came through her headset. "Maria, I'm analyzing their attack patterns. They always target the largest threat first. We might be too small to register as primary targets." "That's our advantage," Maria replied. "All shuttles, follow me in. Target the ship at these coordinates. It's maintaining position behind our front line." Frank watched the battle unfold from the Vengeance. They had already lost 30 ships, but the fleet was learning. Human vessels now moved unpredictably, making it harder for the precise Sendari weapons to find their marks. "Captain," his communications officer called. "Strike team is approaching their target. They request covering fire." Frank nodded. "All batteries, concentrate fire on the front line of Sendari ships. Give strike team their opening." The Vengeance's weapons roared to life, joined by every ship in the fleet. The barrage wasn't particularly effective against the alien hulls, but it created a spectacular light show. Maria's shuttle darted through the chaos, the rest of her team close behind. "Almost in range," she reported. 3 kilometers. 2. Suddenly, her shuttle rocked violently. "I'm hit," she yelled. "Port engine failing." "Abort, Maria," Frank ordered. "Return to the ship." Maria looked at her screens. They were just 1 kilometer from optimal firing range. "Negative. Captain, we're too close. This might be our only chance." She pushed her damaged shuttle forward, alarms blaring in her ears. The rest of her team followed, though 3 shuttles had already been destroyed. "All strike shuttles, prepare to fire radiation emitters on my mark," Maria said. Her hands were steady despite the danger. 3, 2, 1, mark. 20 radiation emitters activated simultaneously, sending invisible waves of energy toward the Sendari command ship. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the alien vessel shuddered. Its smooth movements became jerky. The blue energy weapons flickered and died. "It's working," Pete shouted. "The radiation is disrupting their biological systems." On the Vengeance, the crew cheered as the effect spread to nearby Sendari ships. The aliens' perfect formation broke apart as ship after ship began to drift. "All vessels, target the affected ships," Frank ordered. "Don't give them time to recover." The human fleet surged forward, weapons blazing. For the first time, their attacks caused real damage to the disoriented alien ships. In her shuttle, Maria smiled grimly as she watched the Sendari command ship begin to break apart. But her victory was short-lived. Warning lights flashed across her console as the radiation leaked into her shuttle's cabin. "Strike team, return to the fleet immediately," she ordered. "Radiation containment is failing on my vessel. I'm staying to ensure the command ship is destroyed." Despite protests from Pete and Frank, Maria piloted her damaged shuttle directly toward the heart of the Sendari ship. "For New Dawn," she whispered as her shuttle pierced the alien vessel's hull. Maria's shuttle exploded inside the Sendari command ship, sending shock waves of radiation throughout the alien vessel. The massive ship broke apart in a silent flash of light. On the Vengeance, Frank watched the screens in stunned silence. "Strike team, report," he said quietly. Pete's voice came through, thick with emotion. 15 shuttles returning, Captain. 5 lost, including Maria's." Frank nodded. She gave her life to ensure the mission's success. He turned to his communications officer. "Send word to Earth. First blood is ours." The bridge crew worked with renewed purpose. The Sendari fleet had lost its perfect coordination. Individual alien ships now fought alone, still dangerous but no longer moving as one unstoppable force. "The radiation is spreading between their ships," the science officer reported. "Their biological components are connected somehow. What affects one is affecting others nearby." Frank leaned forward. "Target the damaged vessels. Full weapons barrage." The human fleet pressed their advantage. Ship after ship fired on the struggling Sendari vessels. For every human ship lost, 3 alien ships were now destroyed. On Earth, the Situation Room erupted in cheers as they watched the battle turn. "It's working," Admiral Wells said, her voice thick with emotion. "Maria Rodriguez just changed the course of the battle." Dr. Ford studied the data streaming in. "The radiation is more effective than we predicted. It's causing a cascade failure in their network." President Boyd watched silently. The victory was coming at a terrible cost. Nearly 40 human ships had been destroyed, with thousands of lives lost. But compared to the alternative, human extinction, the sacrifice was necessary. Back in space, the remaining Centauri ships began to retreat. They moved away from the radiation spreading through their ranks, abandoning their damaged comrades. "They're running," Pete said as his shuttle returned to the Vengeance. "We actually made them run." Frank wasn't celebrating yet. "Tactical, track their course. Where are they heading?" The tactical officer's expression changed. "Sir, they're moving toward Earth." Frank's blood ran cold. The Centauri weren't retreating. They were advancing, heading directly for humanity's homeworld with still superior numbers. "All ships form up," he ordered. "We need to pursue at maximum speed. We cannot let them reach Earth." The human fleet regrouped quickly, gathering their wounded and leaving the destroyed Centauri ships behind. The race to save Earth had begun. On the Vengeance, Pete and the surviving strike team pilots gathered in the briefing room. Their faces showed exhaustion and grief for their lost comrades. "The radiation emitters worked better than expected," Pete said, "but we've used most of our supply. We have enough for maybe one more large-scale attack." Frank nodded. "Dr. Ford, can we build more?" Lisa shook her head, "Not without returning to Earth. We need specialized equipment." Frank studied the tactical display. The Centauri would reach Earth days before the human fleet could catch them. Billions of lives hung in the balance. "We need a new plan," he said. "Something they won't expect." Pete looked up, his eyes suddenly bright with an idea. "Captain, what if we don't chase them? What if we go around them?" "Explain." "The Centauri are taking a direct route to Earth. But if we use Jupiter's gravity to slingshot our fastest ships, we could arrive first and set up a defensive line." Lisa nodded slowly. "And we could use the radiation from Jupiter's magnetosphere to enhance our weapons. It's risky, but it might work." Frank considered the plan. It would mean splitting their forces, leaving some ships to harass the Centauri from behind, while the fastest vessels raced ahead. "Make it happen," he ordered. "Select our 20 fastest ships. I'll command this group personally." As the fleet divided, Frank recorded a message to be sent to Earth. "We've struck the first blow for New Dawn. The enemy is wounded but heading toward Earth. We're moving to intercept. Prepare planetary defenses. This war is far from over." The message raced ahead of both fleets, carrying both hope and warning to a world preparing for the fight of its life. Jupiter loomed massive and beautiful as the 20 fastest human ships approached. Captain Frank Murphy watched the gas giants swirling storms through the Vengeance's viewports. The slingshot maneuver was risky, but necessary. "All ships, maintain formation," he ordered. "The gravitational forces will be extreme." Dr. Ford monitored the radiation levels as they skimmed Jupiter's upper atmosphere. "The magnetosphere readings are stronger than expected," she reported. "If we can channel this energy into our weapons, we might have a chance." Back on Earth, frantic preparations continued. Every satellite was converted to a defensive platform. Millions of people moved underground. The United Governments established a final defense line of hastily assembled weapons around major cities. In the White House Situation Room, Admiral Wells received Frank's message. "The Centauri will reach Earth in approximately 36 hours, she told the president. "Murphy's task force will arrive 12 hours earlier if their slingshot works." President Boyd stared at the tactical displays. "Will it be enough?" Greg shook his head. 20 ships against the remaining fleet. The odds are not favorable. "Then we need to improve those odds," Allen said. He pointed to a simulation on one of the screens. What if we weren't just defending Earth? What if we turned the entire solar system into a weapon? The Jupiter slingshot maneuver worked perfectly. The Vengeance and its companion ships accelerated to unprecedented speeds, racing ahead of the Xendari fleet. As they approached Mars orbit, Frank gathered his officers. "We have 10 hours to prepare our defense," he said. "Dr. Ford, what's the status on the radiation weapons?" Lisa looked up from her calculations. "By combining our remaining emitters with the radiation we collected from Jupiter, we've amplified their power. But there's a problem." She paused. "The delivery system can't be automated. Someone will need to pilot the device directly into the heart of their fleet." Silence fell over the room. They all understood what that meant. Another sacrifice. Pete broke the silence. "I'll do it. Maria was my friend. I'll finish what she started." Frank studied the young weapons specialist. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that. First, we try to stop them at Mars." The human ships took positions in Mars orbit, hidden among the red planet's moons, Phobos and Deimos. Engineers worked tirelessly to install the enhanced radiation emitters on small unmanned drones. "They're coming," the tactical officer reported as the Xendari fleet entered the detection range. 87 ships remaining. Frank took a deep breath. "Deploy the drones. Let's see if we can thin their numbers before they reach Earth." The drones launched silently, small enough to avoid immediate detection. They approached the Xendari fleet from multiple angles, programmed to detonate their radiation payloads on proximity. On the main screen, Frank watched as the first wave of drones reached their targets. Flashes of energy erupted across the enemy formation as the radiation disrupted their biological systems. 15 Xendari ships drifted out of formation, their systems failing. "It's working," Pete said, "but not well enough." He was right. The remaining Xendari ships adapted quickly, creating a protective formation around a massive vessel at their center. "That must be their new command ship," Frank said. "And they've learned from our previous attack. They're shielding it." Lisa's face was grim. "The drones can't penetrate their formation. We need a direct delivery to that command ship." Frank studied the tactical display, looking for any opening. There was none. The Xendari had learned their lesson well. In the silence that followed, Pete stood up. "I meant what I said, Captain. I can pilot the main emitter device. One ship might make it through where the drones couldn't." Frank looked at the young man who had already lost so much. He thought of New Dawn, of Maria, of Earth waiting behind them. Sometimes victory required terrible choices. "Prepare the ship," he said quietly. "But we're not done fighting yet." Earth filled the view screen as the remaining ships of humanity's fleet formed their last line of defense. Behind them, the blue planet glowed against the darkness of space. Before them, the Xendari fleet approached, still 70 ships strong despite their losses at Mars. On the Vengeance, Captain Frank Murphy watched Pete prepare the small ship carrying their final hope, the enhanced radiation device powered by Jupiter's magnetosphere. "The calculations are complete," Dr. Ford said. "If the device reaches the Xendari command ship and detonates, the radiation cascade should affect their entire fleet." Pete checked his flight suit one last time. "Captain, I've recorded messages for my family. Could you make sure they get them?" Frank placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. "You'll deliver them yourself when we win this fight." A proximity alarm sounded. The Xendari had entered weapons range. "All ships, defensive formation Alpha," Frank ordered. "Give Pete his opening." The human vessels moved into position, creating a wall of steel between Earth and the approaching aliens. The first energy beams from the Xendari ships sliced through the darkness, and the final battle for humanity began. On Earth, billions watched through the fleet's cameras. In homes and shelters, in the streets and underground bunkers, humanity held its collective breath. President Boyd stood in the Situation Room, his advisors silent beside him. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "they should know we stood against extinction." The battle was brutal and swift. Human ships fought with desperate courage, But the secondary technology was still superior. One by one, vessels exploded or drifted, crippled. Frank's voice remained steady despite the chaos. All ships converge on these coordinates. We need to create a gap in their formation. The remaining human vessels obeyed, concentrating their fire on a single point in the secondary line. For a moment, a path opened toward the alien command ship. "Now, Pete," Frank ordered. Pete's small vessel shot forward, engines at maximum. The secondary noticed immediately, redirecting their weapons. Energy beams lashed out, grazing the small ship's hull. "I'm hit," Pete reported, his voice calm despite the damage. "Life support failing. But I'm still on course." Lisa monitored his approach from the Vengeance. 5,000 meters to target. 4,000. Frank watched as Pete's damaged ship limped toward the massive secondary command vessel. More energy beams converged on the small craft, tearing away pieces of its hull. 1,000 meters. Lisa counted down. "Pete, you need to activate the device now." In his failing ship, Pete reached for the controls. Warning lights flashed around him as systems shut down. His fingers found the activation sequence just as another hit rocked his vessel. "For Maria," he whispered. "For New Dawn." He pressed the button. The radiation device activated, releasing a wave of energy that engulfed Pete's ship first, then spread to the secondary command vessel. The alien ship shuddered as its biological components began to break down. The effect cascaded outward, jumping from one secondary ship to another. On the Vengeance, Frank watched in awe as the enemy fleet began to disintegrate. "It's working," he said softly. Pete did it. Across the solar system, from the battle at Earth to the ships still harassing the secondary rear guard, humans witnessed the alien fleet's destruction. Ships drifted aimlessly, their weapons and engines dead. In Pete's small vessel, radiation alarms blared as the lethal energy filled the cabin. With his remaining strength, he activated his communication system. "Captain," he said, his voice weak but determined. "Tell Earth. Tell them New Dawn is avenged." His ship exploded in a final burst of light, taking the secondary command ship with it. As the alien fleet collapsed, Frank sent a final message to Earth. "The enemy is defeated. Humanity stands." On Earth, celebrations erupted worldwide. Strangers embraced in streets. Families wept with relief. But among the joy was solemn remembrance. For New Dawn's 50,000. For Maria. For Pete. And for all who had given their lives. 3 months later, a memorial was established in orbit above Proxima Centauri V. Its simple inscription read, "They broadcast our destruction. We broadcast our resilience." Beside it, a new colony ship began construction. Its name, painted boldly across its hull, Second Dawn.